Hi everyone, so today I'll be sharing with you about something that happens inside our bodies and in other organisms too. It's called anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration is a type of cellular respiration that happens without oxygen. Instead of using oxygen to break down glucose, our cells use other methods like fermentation to release energy.
Let's break down the science. When cells can't catch a breath, literally. Fermentation is a type of anaerobic respiration. That means cells break down sugar without using oxygen. In yeast, this turns sugar into alcohol during fermentation. It also produces carbon dioxide gas. That carbon dioxide makes dough expand, helping bread rise. The alcohol produced by yeast is used to brew beer. In your muscles, anaerobic respiration produces lactic acid. That causes the familiar burning sensation during intense exercise. So next time you're out of breath after exercise, thank fermentation for providing that quick backup energy your cells need.
This process is less efficient than aerobic respiration, producing only a small amount of ATP. It allows organisms to survive in environments where oxygen is absent. It is common in microorganisms like yeast and some bacteria, and can also occur in muscle cells of animals when oxygen supply is too low, such as during intense exercise. So in short, anaerobic respiration is how our cells make energy without the use of oxygen or without using oxygen. So normally, our cells like to use aerobic respiration because it gives a lot of energy. But sometimes, like when you're running really fast, yung jogging ka or yung exercise ka and intense exercise, your muscles can't get enough oxygen quickly. So that's when your cells switch to anaerobic respiration.
Now, let's tackle about the process of anaerobic respiration. Have you ever wondered why your muscles feel sore after running or exercising? That soreness is actually related to a process called anaerobic respiration. So, let me explain the process of anaerobic respiration. Glucose is broken down in the cytoplasm through glycolysis, producing pyruvate and a small amount of ATP. So, the process starts with glucose, which is our main source of energy. Inside the cytoplasm of the cell, glucose undergoes a process called glycolysis. In this step, glucose is broken down into smaller molecules called pyruvate, and along with that, a small amount of ATP is produced. Remember, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, which is like the energy currency of the cell. Without ATP, our cells cannot function properly. Next, without oxygen, pyruvate enters fermentation instead of the mitochondria. Now, the difference happens when there's no oxygen available. Normally, if oxygen is present, pyruvate will enter the mitochondria for aerobic respiration, which produces a lot of energy. But if there's no oxygen, the pyruvate cannot go into the mitochondria. Instead, it enters a different pathway called fermentation. So what happens during fermentation depends on the type of organism. In animals, including humans, pyruvate is converted into lactic acid. This is why when we do intense activities like sprinting or heavy exercise, we sometimes feel pain, cramps, or soreness in our muscles. That pain is caused by the buildup of lactic acid in the muscle cells. In other organisms like yeast and some bacteria, pyruvate is converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide instead. This is very useful for humans because this process is used in making bread, beer, and wine. For example, when making bread, the carbon dioxide released by yeast makes the dough rise, while in alcoholic drinks, the ethanol is the alcohol content. So overall, anaerobic respiration is a way for cells to still produce energy even without oxygen. The advantage is that it provides energy quickly, which is very helpful in urgent situations like intense exercise. However, the disadvantage is that energy produced is very limited compared to aerobic respiration. Now, let's move on to the functions of anaerobic respiration. First, its main function is that it supplies energy when oxygen is not available. For example, when we are running really fast or doing intense exercise, sometimes our breathing cannot catch up with how much oxygen our muscles need. In this case, our body switches to anaerobic respiration to make sure that our muscles can still work even without oxygen. Second, it helps our muscle cells keep working during physical activity or intense exercise. This is why athletes can still perform for a short time, even when they feel out of breath. However, because anaerobic respiration only gives a small amount of ATP, the muscles eventually get tired, and that's when we need to rest and recover. Third, anaerobic respiration allows microorganisms such as yeast to survive in environments that don't have oxygen. This is why yeast can live and continue their process even if they are in oxygen-poor areas. And lastly, it plays a big role in fermentation, which is very important in food and drink production. For example, yeast fermentation is used in baking to make bread soft and fluffy. It is also used in making drinks like yogurt, beer, and wine. So, you can see that anaerobic respiration is not only important inside our bodies, but it is also applied in industry that we benefit from every day. In conclusion, anaerobic respiration is a backup system that allows energy production without oxygen. Even though it doesn't make as much energy as aerobic respiration, it is still very important for survival and also has many applications in our daily lives.
Good day everyone. Today I will be tackling the characteristic of anaerobic respiration. The first characteristics is it occurs without oxygen unlike aerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration happens when oxygen is not available or limited. Instead of using oxygens as the final electron acceptor, cells use other molecules or simply break down glucose partially. This process is common in muscle cells during intense exercise or in microorganisms that live in oxygen-poor environment. Second, it produces less ATP, making it less efficient for energy production. So since glucose is not completely broken down, anaerobic respiration releases far less energy compared to aerobic respiration. It only produces about 2 ATP molecules per glucose molecule, while aerobic respiration can produce up to 36 to 38 ATP. This make it a quick but inefficient way of generating energy. The third characteristic is the end products vary, such as lactic acid in animals or ethanol, and CO2 or carbon dioxide in yeast. Depending on the organism, the product differ. In animals, glucose is broken down into lactic acid, which can cause muscle fatigue and cramps. In yeast, and some bacteria, glucose is converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide. This process is the basis of bread making and alcohol fermentation. Lastly, it happens in the cytoplasm of the cell, not in the mitochondria, unlike aerobic respiration, which takes place in the mitochondria. Anaerobic respiration occurs internally in the cytoplasm. This is because it's not only involved glycolysis and fermentation, not the Krebs cycle or electron transport chain.
And now, I'll be discussing anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration is essential for cells that cannot access oxygen. Unlike aerobic respiration, which is much more efficient, anaerobic respiration produces less ATP, making it less efficient for energy production. In anaerobic respiration, the end products vary. In animals, it results in lactic acid, while in
Yeast.
ethanol and carbon dioxide are produced. Now, let's break down the process into its components. At the bottom of the process, we have glycolysis, which happens in the cytoplasm without needing oxygen. During glycolysis, one glucose molecule is broken down into two pyruvate molecules, generating 2 ATP and 2 NADH molecules in the process. This provides a quick but small supply of ATP. However, glycolysis alone cannot continue without oxygen. The pyruvate produced does not enter the mitochondria because there is no oxygen. Instead, it enters a fermentation pathway to regenerate NAD+, so glycolysis can continue producing ATP. Fermentation is where the regeneration of NAD+ occurs. This process leads to the production of different end products depending on the organism. Lactic acid in animals, or ethanol and carbon dioxide in
Yeast.
and bacteria. In summary, anaerobic respiration is a crucial alternative energy pathway that allows organisms to survive in environments lacking oxygen. It generates less ATP than aerobic respiration, but it is vital for energy production in the absence of oxygen.
Good day everyone! I will now discuss the two possible ways of fermentation under anaerobic respiration. The first pathway is the lactate pathway, which occurs in animals. In this process, pyruvate is converted into lactate or lactic acid. Its main function is to allow muscle cells to keep producing ATP, especially during exercise when our oxygen levels are low. This is why our muscles sometimes feel sore during and after intense activity because of the buildup of the lactic acid. The second pathway is the ethanol and carbon dioxide pathway, which occurs in yeast and some bacteria. Here, pyruvate is converted into ethanol while releasing carbon dioxides. This process is very important for microorganisms because it helps them survive without oxygen. It also has practical uses for us, since it is the basis for making bread, beer, and wine. So in summary, the lactate pathway is more common in animals, while the ethanol pathway is mostly found in microorganisms like yeast and bacteria. And that concludes our report about anaerobic respiration. I hope this helped you understand how organisms can still produce energy even without oxygen. Thank you so much for listening.